What's up, YouTube? Capital G. Alright guys, today we are talking Rock Stun. I believe that this is the absolute best under the radar deck of the entire format right now. Now, I know in a video about 10 days ago, I said that TG Stun and X Sabers were probably the best potential for tier 2 decks, and a duelist would be very wise to consider them for regionals, but I don't think that this deck has tier 2 potential. I think this deck has tier 1 potential. I think that it's finally able to keep up with today's meta. It has enough good monsters going for it. And for the most part, people don't know what the hell this deck does. They don't know the monsters. They don't know what the deck is trying to do. And honestly, I think that this deck is, like, it's so freaking good. Now, what is Rock Stun? Rock Stun at its core is a Kweki control deck. Now, if you're like me, you generally know the idea of Kweki. I've seen Dove K Dad's deck list. People used to ask me, Capital G, what do you think of Rock Stun? And I was just like, oh my goodness, isn't that Kweki? The deck's garbage. I've never really believed in them. The thing about the deck now is with a couple of new support cards, the deck can actually keep up. At its heart and soul, you have the 3 Kweki cards. You've got Guardian, Sandman, and Wall. One of them negates traps, one of them negates spells, and one of them negates monster effects, obviously, by launching themselves. Very Doom Caliber-esque. So, I already like the fact that it has that aspect going because you can just, you have 3 angles of the game covered. Except it doesn't just stop there. You're also going to run copies of Fossil Dyna maxed out and Neospatian Grand Mole. Now, luckily for us, those are also rocks, so that hefty maintenance fee that these cards have to pay, it doesn't become such a big deal. That's the only reason that I really don't think that these cards ever saw play is because having to play the Iron Core was just very counterproductive. And, I mean, there just weren't a lot of other good rock monsters. The deck was very linear. All right, so from that perspective, you also have Stall Lockdown, getting rid of those Spirit Reapers and Zen Mains and garbage like that. Gotchi if people try and sit there and stall you out. And the big one, Fossil Dyna, just no special summoning at all. Now, the only reason that good standalone stun monsters like the Kweki monsters like Doom Caliber, like Thunder King Ryo, like Fossil Dyna are somewhat tolerable is because they all seem to top out, especially the level 4s, they all seem to top out at about 1900 attack. Well, see, the thing is, the way that people have been building this deck now, we found the way to basically circumvent that aspect. Solidarity. Solidarity is flat out ridiculous in this deck. Since every single monster in the deck is rock, which helps pay for these guys, you can run Solidarity and give everybody an 800 boost. I'm really not high on cards like this, except for when you run it in a stun deck, because you have to think about the fact that your opponent is now facing, 2,700 beaters that you're normal summoning from the hand every single turn. And those aren't just vanilla monsters. These monsters answer spell and traps, which is the biggest aspect. You now have a 2,100 Fossil Dyna. That's not going to be easy to deal with. If I have a 2,700 monster on the field, most of the time you need to exceed over it. You need to synchro over it. Okay, well, that's not going to be very easy if he's 2,100. My favorite aspect of this deck it's not even the fact that the deck has lockdown on 5 different angles. It's the fact that the deck doesn't have, it's unlike any other stun deck I can think of. It doesn't have to worry about losing to mass removal if it doesn't have the My Body or the Starlight or the Solemn. That's always been the problem with heroes and TG and stun. It's like, oh, well, if my opponent has the Dark Hole, if they have the Heavy Storm, if I summon into a Torrential, I basically lose, or I'll lose a massive advantage, or I'll have to, burn my Solemn. If I don't have the Starlight, I can't really set all out. That's the thing about this deck, and it's not really an issue with this deck because of Wall and because of Sandman. Sandman, he takes out those traps. Wall takes out those spell cards, so those answers that, you were only running a couple of cards are going to cost you half your life points. I mean, you have 3 of those. I mean, you've got 3 Walls. You've got 3 Sandman. In addition, losing those cards isn't really that big of a deal. Now, that might be something that people think, oh, well, if you're just burning through your Kweki monsters, well, how are you really going to win? Okay, see, well, that's where Block Golem comes in. For those of you guys who don't know what Block Golem is, I believe it just came out in Rise of the Duelist. It's basically like Rescue Cat and Mizuki kind of like had a baby or something like that. Basically, you summon it to the field, you send it to the graveyard, or you tribute it to the graveyard, and you get to summon 2 level 4 rock monsters from your graveyard. So, those Quackimurus, which, you know, you're popping to negate your opponent's spells and traps, guess what? You get to bring them right back with Rock Golem, or you can bring back a Fossa Golem for even more lockdown. So, the aspect of, you know, letting your Quackimurus, you know, get rid of those problem cards, it's not really something that you ever have to worry about running out of. So, and just not to mention, this deck wants to simplify the game state. You know, it's going to be very difficult to get over 2,700 monsters when I can pick and choose what spells and traps to negate. You know what I mean? If you want to activate a Power Duality, I'm like, okay, I'm cool with that. I'm not going to negate that. I'm going to negate a Heavy Storm. I'm going to negate a Bottomless Trap Hole or a Mirror Force. I only have to deal with your problem cards. That's what I really like about this deck. And again, you don't lose if you don't have Solemns or Starlight Road. Another thing I like about this deck is, this might be one of the only decks I've seen OCG builds that aren't even running Solemn Warning, and I thought that was crazy at first until I really looked at the deck and I'm thinking, I'm dropping 2,700 beaters. I've got a monster that stops all special summons. I can pretty much negate any mass removal that I like. I'm not so sure that I need Solemn Warning, that I can't just max out on D-Prisons and feel totally safe in this deck. Now, there is one problem. Windups can present a small problem. I feel that, you know, if the windup player opens with that Magician Shark play, they can basically turbo this deck out before you get established, you know, because once this deck gets established, I can't really see that many decks messing with it, to be honest. But then I thought about that and I'm like, well, doesn't that really happen to any deck? Now, that does happen to, you know, that can happen to any deck. Unfortunately, you can't really run hand traps at least game 1. Otherwise, you can't run Solidarity. Another thing I like about this deck is this deck makes Shockmaster really, really, really easily. It's very easy to have a Quackimurus on the field, summon a block Golem, and then get your 3 guys and just succeed into a Shockmaster. And then your next turn, summon another Quackimurus card, and it's like, all right, well, I now have Spell Lockdown and I have Trap Lockdown completely. How are you going to answer that? I don't know. I am very, very high on Rock Stun right now. The deck can be a little slow. I look at the early game and I think, the deck might be just a little slow. I don't love the fact that you can't run hand traps game 1 because, you know, you really want to make use of that Solidarity. And you even have to watch out how you're seeing, because if you start putting the Xyz in the graveyard, obviously you're turning off your Solidarity. But overall, I love the fact that you have you have 5 major aspects that you can completely lock down. I like the fact that you don't need power cards like Warning and Starlight, otherwise you auto lose to Mass Removal. Mass Removal is so high this format. I don't think it's been this high in a very long time now that Mirror Force is at 2 and people are playing 2 Mirror Force. I think that this deck is one to definitely watch out for, and I want to know what you guys' opinions on it. I'm definitely considering this card for the regionals that I have in 2 weeks, guys. Talk to you guys later.